Pat Skorkowsky, welcome to 13 Action News. Thanks for coming on.
No, it's great to be here, John.
So let's talk about what's in the news and what you're thinking about every day now, which is this new reorganization of the Clark County School District. I'm both puzzled and I'm having deja vu, Superintendent, over this. I'm puzzled because when this bill passed out of the legislature, AB 394, was rushed through at the end, but it called for local precincts of the school district. That's not what's going on.
Actually, it is in the sense that they redefined the word precinct, and the precinct is a school. So every school is now considered a precinct.
Yeah, but that's not what they had in mind. You know that, right? I mean, you agree on that, right? That's not what the legislature had in mind.
It has definitely evolved since June 1st, 2015.
Evolved, yeah.
It has.
So, okay, so let's talk about how does that help student achievement? I think that's what the big question, the most important question is. How does creating, okay, the way you said it, have hundreds of schools, you create hundreds of precincts. How does that help students?
First and foremost, it is going to put decisions down at the local school level when it comes to the instructional strategies, the design of their plan for dealing with their individual school issues. So every January 2015, we are going to give their strategic budget workbook and a data subset to them that shows their individual school data, and they can drill down to individual subgroups and students all the way down. They're going to have to design a plan that meets the needs for their student without the top-down approach to say that, okay, you know, in this situation we think that everybody needs to be doing this instructional strategy or this textbook needs to be used. It gives that school team, that organizational team, the flexibility to make that decision at the local level that will best suit the kids in their building.
So top-down is bad, says the guy at the top?
That's right. You know what, I've learned that, and I don't think that I've completely ruled as a top-down leader as a superintendent, because I remember what it's like to be both a classroom teacher and a principal.
You were both, yeah.
And so flexibility has always been part of the process. And in some situations, we've had to adjust our way of thinking recently to make sure that some of the initiatives that we have in place can be changed to be a menu approach for schools, as opposed to here's what you're going to do.
Of course, it makes intuitive sense to people. Let the principals make more decisions. But this whole idea of empowerment schools, Pat Skorkowsky, has come up in Nevada before. I remember, you and I have been around long enough to remember this almost 10 years ago, and Jim Gibbons, who was then governor, put it in there. Michael Strembitsky, this guy from Edmonton who was the savior, came down. Didn't work out so well. I guess I'm wondering, why is this the right model now? Do you really honestly believe it's the right model now, or are you being dragged kicking and screaming?
I truly believe in this model, and I think the difference between back in 2006, 7, and 8, when we were first implementing those first schools, and now is that the barriers that we had in place back then were we had an extremely centralized service where all the decisions were made, facilities, maintenance, food service, transportation, et cetera, were all made at the central level. And so schools had very little flexibility, and the flexibilities they had to then compete with a system that was still structured for the remaining 220 schools in a centralized model. This is actually decentralizing the entire central structure to a certain extent. A service model for schools to be able to utilize the services we have, or eventually they may be able to purchase services from the outside.
You know, the reason you have a federal government, even though some people think it's too big, is because you need an overall governing body over the states to make sure that each state doesn't do things they shouldn't be doing. You're going to have hundreds, and again, you use this characterization, so I'm going to keep using it now, hundreds of precincts now, and you're saying that it's decentralized to some extent. These empowered principals, you could have a situation, and I remember when they first talked about breaking up the school district, there was a lot of talk about creating a caste system, creating haves and have-nots. Aren't you worried that you're going to have some schools that will have better principals, better budgets, more active parents? Parents have a greater role now too. Maybe some could argue too great because they have the ability to essentially maybe get principals fired. How do you control that? How do you have some kind of uniformity there? Because not all uniformity is bad, right?
That's correct. It's bounded autonomy. So there are certain things that they can and cannot do. Specifically looking at the district's policies and regs, they still all have to follow those policies and regs. Now there's the opportunity for waivers between the regs and the CBA, but that's a very specific process. Oh, contractual bargaining agreement. Okay. So our contract that we have with each of the associations, that still has to be followed. One of the biggest principles behind this is do no harm to others or the system. And so they can't make decisions that are going to impact the schools around them or the system at whole and cost it more money or
It sounds good, though, but who judges that? Do you judge that?
I think we do. And then this new role, you know, we are eliminating our student achievement officers, and we are putting in school associate superintendents that their job is to monitor compliance. They are all about the law and making sure they're following the law and that they're following district policies. And so it is more of a mentoring, coaching, monitoring position. That's their job, is to make sure that schools are not going rogue, so to speak, that they are making sure that they're providing that quality education to every one of their students, and they're not creating issues in the system as a whole.
You're not worried that that's going to happen, though, that you're going to have haves and have-nots. You're not going to have, some parent groups could get mad at a principal even just because their kid wasn't treated right, even though their kid was treated fairly, and they try to get rid of the principal. They have more power now. It seems to me that there is a law of unintended consequences that could take place here.
There's always the potential with that, especially with massive changes of this size.
Right.
No other district has gone through this type of a reorganization. And it's one of those things that we are working to ensure that students are not harmed, that families are not harmed. We have to protect our employees, and that's what our bargaining agreements will look at. We also have to make sure that people understand, just because a parent group gets upset doesn't mean that they have the authority to remove the principal. There are certain laws and contractual obligations that have to be met.
They have more power to start that process going now, though, do they not?
They have the opportunity for feedback on the principal, but it's not necessarily in the evaluation under the Nevada Educator Performance Framework.
So if you're going to have these hundreds of different schools with empowered principals, how many people, how many jobs are being lost in administration? Because that's always been the criticism of the Clark County School District. A lot of it unfair, by the way. I've looked at this in the past. But you would think if you're going to decentralize this way, you could get rid of almost everybody.
The challenge is this first year, we are just implementing the system as a whole. And so 80% of our funds that are not partitioned off or categorical or federal funds go down to the schools. We can do that at this point in time without decentralizing services first. There will be the opportunity to look at, with the building principals in the schools, how we can decentralize certain services and make it better for them. So at this point in time, there's really no jobs being lost. Positions eliminated, yeah, that student achievement officer position is going away, but it is more about how can we rework the system. And it may end up that we need more of a certain position because schools are willing to pay for it.
I guess what I'm wondering is how do you monitor this from your office? How do you do that?
There's a couple of ways. That school associate superintendent position is going to be key to the success of this. I will be meeting with them directly on a regular basis to see how it is. They will come forward with any concerns. There will be certain reporting mechanisms that they will use to let me know when there are issues that come up. We will be working underneath a model that really ensures that communication is going both up and down the system, and those principal supervisors don't have direct access to me on a regular basis right now. They have access, but it's not a regular basis. This will be a regularly scheduled meeting where their job is to both advocate for their schools and also let us know where there are compliance and monitoring issues.
I guess I'm wondering, and I don't mean this to be a glib question, I'm just going to ask it straight out. With the way that this is now structured, why do we need a superintendent?
Somebody has to still coordinate all of this work.
But does that just create a ministerial function? I mean, you're a guy who's worked very hard to get where you are. I know your background. You're not just moving pieces around. You're supposed to be setting policies to some extent, although the trustees do that and ask you to implement it. I mean, your powers are greatly diminished. Your ability to influence what happens in the school district is greatly diminished.
I would disagree on that, and sometimes in the senses that you have to sometimes give up power to get power. And I think it comes through my relationships with all these people over the many years that helps us build a better system. I think I'm needed more now than ever because I know both the central side and the school-based side. So I am the one that is going to have to really push the central services to understand that now it is all about customer service of that school. And I've said to them publicly on a couple occasions in the last few months, if it is not for the schools and the people in the schools, we don't have jobs in the central office. And so we have to shift our thinking. And I think that I'm key to that because I understand what it's like to be that building principal, and I understand what it's like to be that classroom teacher. And so I will come at it from that perspective.
Okay, so be honest with me then, Pat Skorkowsky. Let's go from both those roles. If you were a teacher in the school district right now and you heard about this, would you be wary? Would you be excited? How would you feel, honestly?
Probably both of those, wary and excited. As a teacher leader, I was engaged in what was going on at the school with my building principal. I had opportunities to help provide professional development and support to other teachers in the building. This gives me a greater role to do that as a teacher in this system. As a building principal, you get a little wary because change is different. But I ran my school with a leadership team. Parents were always engaged in the process, and that was over 15 years ago since I've been a building principal. So I think that for people to understand this, I think you said it earlier, the principal is going to be the key in this. We have to make sure that we train up and we have the best building administrators to be able to work through this situation.
Listen, I come at this, as you well know, that most people who get into education are doing it for the right reasons. They want to help kids. It's not a way to make a lot of money, right? They're long hours. But you're going to have some bad apples in the barrel.
Sure.
And with hundreds of schools, there may be more than 2 or 3 bad apples. And principals now, with more power, isn't it going to be harder to find those bad apples? And won't those bad apples now have the power to do real harm?
I think that in this situation, actually the bad apples are going to come to the top very quickly, and we'll be able to then
you'll be able to
address
see them.
this.
You'll be able to see
You'll
them.
be able to see them. It's going to be more transparent, and there will be no hiding in this system, because the way the structure and the communication within the school and having the opportunity to have a say, people are going to be talking, and those bad apples are going to come to the forefront.
Let's talk a little bit about the trustees, your bosses. They have not said a lot during this entire process. I've seen some statements, but they've really been pretty much mush. Tell me honestly, the trustees have essentially sat by, Pat Skorkowsky has sat by, you're going to love this description, and just let the entire district be dismantled.
And I can understand that viewpoint and that perspective. I don't know that I've really slept much since June 1st, 2015, because of this entire process with all the meetings and all the requirements that have been to get information out to those individuals.
And that bill was rushed through at the last minute. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it well. I was on the phone at that point in time, trying to address that concern that was coming forward. And I think that while our trustees kind of sat back, it was a legislative process, and it's hard to insert yourself, sometimes elected official to elected official. I think that...
Well, wait a second. I'm going to let you go on.
That's okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you cannot buy that. These people are elected.
Sure.
They're the closest to the schools, and they're going to sit by and let the legislature, responding maybe to parents' concerns, maybe responding to the State Board of Ed, maybe well-intentioned, whatever it was, they essentially have sat by and let... You tried to head this off at first yourself by proposing your own reorganization. You saw what was coming down the pike. So, I guess what I'm wondering is, does the superintendent now, after all this has happened, say, we are going down with the ship, or we steered the ship in the right direction?
I think that we're definitely going in the right direction with this. I actually am very excited about this. Yeah, there's a lot of fear, but I'm excited about this because I think it gives the opportunity to change the story of our schools and to change the story of our district. And this gives us the opportunity to do it school by school, and gives it the opportunity to do it parent by parent, community member by community member.
I want to wrap up this discussion with something that I've heard about here at KTNV, where I've been a couple months now, and they tell me here that you are a hard guy to get on camera, that you talk about transparency, that your folks stonewall them all the time when they're trying to get basic public information. Have you heard these complaints?
I've heard the complaints.
This is not just the media saying, oh, God, we can't get a hold of you. This is what they think. They consider here at this station systemic. They've tried to get lists of people banned from campus, which should obviously be public information. They've tried to get lists of how many police officers there are. They can't get basic information. Is there a lack of transparency in the school district that you're concerned with?
Not at all. I think that some of the things that we get asked approached for me to be on camera are not media-worthy stories. So why am I going to waste my time?
Give me an example of something like that.
When we talk about specific issues with transportation where a person is caught speeding, and there's a video camera of a speeding.
That's trivial.
That's exactly. But
okay.
That's a lot of the requests from media.
Really?
Is for me to come on camera and make statements about stories like that. I don't have time to deal with that. I need to deal with the bigger issues, like the issues that we're talking about today, like our success of our students, our safety of our students, our achievement of our students. That's what I need to be focused on.
So you don't think there's any stonewalling going on by the Public Information Office at time? Is there a policy that the media can't go directly and talk to principals, for instance?
No. We just want to know. No, we just want to know what they're talking about. We ask principals to call us because oftentimes principals may have their piece of information, but they may not know the whole picture. So we just want to make sure they provide an accurate setting. So no, I don't think so at all.
Are you still the boss then?
You betcha.
Last question on overall. Let's wrap this up by asking this question. What's a reasonable amount of time, Pat Skorkowsky, to take a look at this reorganization and see if it's actually working? And by working, and I think you will use the same metric I would, are students learning better? Are grades getting better? Are schools being more successful? Is it a year? Is it 5 years? Seriously, what's the reasonable time?
I think the first indicator will be actually around September, October of 2018.
This is supposed to start in 2017 now, in case people don't know.
We begin the planning season for the schools on January 15th of this year.
Right.
And so they put their plan in place and they start implementation in August of 2017. When we get the results back at the end of that 2017-2018 year, that will be our first indication. This next September, we'll be giving baseline data to say, here's where we're at. The next year, you're going to be able to see an indication of where things are going. The second year, you'll have a better viewpoint because you'll have 2 data points which to compare it.
All right, Pat Skorkowsky, pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thank you, John.